Just to spend a few minutes reiterating some of the things that we've already talked about. There has been for decades the debate over the difference between killing and letting a person die. And there have been surveys that have been done that have found up to 70% of the deaths in hospitals involve some sort of decision by a physician or a relative to cease treatment of a patient who is terminal. So the this is happening, but the intentional termination of a dying patient's life is still illegal in most states. So they're able to do it under the auspices of stating that it's to relieve the pain, and yet it's creating what's called, in many cases, a terminal sedation, which the physician may not always intend death, but the relief of pain. But how does this terminal sedation really differ from killing the patient? And is it a matter of only semantics? So if this is already happening, why then is it illegal to have physician assisted suicide? So we've talked about that a little bit. Another issue is the relief of suffering. One of the most persuasive arguments for physician assisted suicide or physician assisted dying is the appeal to mercy. Think about Anna Powell, who saw these patients who were suffering in this terrible heat, and they were dehydrated and they were experiencing considerable discomfort, and it was only, in her mind, it was only going to get worse. So this observing another human being in this untreatable pain makes us want to end that pain and end that suffering. And we're able to do it for our animals, so why can't we do it for people? And that's the argument that many people who are for physician-assisted suicide, that's one of the arguments that they make. One of the things that's important to remember is that not all pain can be controlled. And there is a percentage of it. And a person who is terminal has to often weigh whether they want to be in this medication fog and not be present but not have significant pain, maybe some pain, or do they want to have the pain and be present and spend their last moments with their family? So that's something that an autonomous person, a decision that they have to make. The other consideration here is that suffering, and while we know that pain is something that you experience physically, suffering is something that's unique and personal to the person. So we can measure pain objectively. We can't always measure suffering. We can't know how a person is suffering or how much suffering that they're going through. So that again is subjective to the person. We've talked in some length about the slippery slopes. There are a lot of arguments for slippery slopes and the fear for people who are against physician-assisted suicide of, if we let this happen, then how far will it go? If we allow the abortion of a fetus with Down syndrome, then, how long will it be until we allow the assisted killing or the termination of a child who is born with Down syndrome? So, the people who are against this physician assisted suicide fear things like that happening, that slippery slope. Another thing to consider is the physician roles and the cries for help. So physicians take an oath that, they should not kill. They don't take the Hippocratic oath really anymore, but each medical profession has an oath that physicians take, and their goal, their mission is to be a healer. The fact is, though, that not everything can be healed, and one thing that can't be healed is death. There is no healing from death. We're all going to die. So it's important to remember, and this is the argument. I'm not saying one position or another. I'm just presenting you with different arguments. The arguments for the people who are pro physician-assisted suicide are that there's more than one way for a physician to be a compassionate healthcare provider for the patients that they serve. So it doesn't always necessarily mean healing. That person is not going to get better. So is there another way that physician or that healthcare provider can demonstrate compassion. And then mistakes and abuses. Doctors make mistakes. There was a story of a surgeon who had a young woman who had ovarian cancer, and she repeatedly asked him to end her misery and end her suffering. She was in unbearable pain. She was screaming at night, and he just couldn't listen to her screaming anymore. So he decided that he would help end her misery, and he went in one night, and she wasn't screaming, and he thought she had either passed away or was so unconscious from the pain that she couldn't scream anymore. And he noticed that she was semi-conscious. She wasn't unconscious, and she wasn't dead. So he decided not to do it. He had brought the syringe in there to do it. So he decided not to. And then he went in the next day, and she was sitting up, and she was feeling well, and her cancer had gone into remission. So there are mistakes that are made, or potentially almost made, on the parts of some healthcare providers and some patients. So she lived another couple of months. Most, again, going back to one of the arguments that we talked about before, is that many people who are requesting this physician-assisted suicide are actually seeking attention, or they're trying to exert some sort of control in a situation in which they feel like they don't have any control. They would like, relief of some of the symptoms and relief of depression, but, what are the symptoms and how can it be addressed? Is it something social that, remember, going back to what we talked about a short time ago, that when they were asked why it is that they want to die now, what condition creates that desire in them now, they often said things like that they couldn't do things that they had previously done. And if there's a way to help them be able to do those things that they had previously done, would that then change their desire? So are these actually cries for help, or is it anything else? So that's it for this topic. I think I presented you with a lot of information here that you can use to frame your various arguments for the debate on this hot topic. Lot to think about, lots of potential arguments one way or the other. You know what your sides are, even if it's not what you truly believe. And I think after our debate, I think many of us, we've gone through that ethical dilemma processing, in that under some conditions we believe this, but under other conditions maybe not. And that's the true essence of an ethical dilemma, is that there are varying and competing principles at stake, and we have to be able to weigh those principles to try to come up with the best potential outcome. So that's it on this topic. I will talk to you soon.